Good evening, everybody. I'm going to present Quartex Pascal, which is a 100% Delphi project. This project has been going for a couple of years now. Most of you have probably heard about it before, but I think you will find that a lot has happened since the last presentation. So we are getting close to version 1.0, which is the release candidate, or the first official version. So I'm just going to rehash a little bit now in the beginning, so that those of you who haven't seen the project gets a feel for what this is all about. First, just a few lines about me. I'm not going to spend too much time on myself. I'm a software developer. I work for DIPS ASA in Bergen, Norway. I used to work at Embarcadero as an SC for Europe, Asia, and North Africa. My background comes from Commodore 64 and Amiga. That's when I started. Obviously, I went to the PC quite quickly. I've also been working with embedded technology and basically had IoT as a hobby. You know, Raspberry Pi machines, those tiny one-card computers. I love those. A previous project I had, which was kind of the same thing, is Smart Mobile Studio. And I'm a certified Delphi developer and MVP. I actually have the MVP t-shirt on me. This is important. You also know me probably from social media, Delphi developer, C++ developer, and so forth. So I spend a lot of time on Facebook and social media, and I've been doing that for a lot of years. So yeah, let's move on. So Quartex Pascal has one feature basically, and that is can we turn JavaScript into a rapid application development system? So basically, you write Object Pascal. You have normal units, you have form files, etc., but it's all converted to JavaScript. That way, you can work in a language that you are familiar with, and then you can emit JavaScript, create websites, you can create mobile applications, and so on. But that is not an easy thing to do because JavaScript is very different. So yeah. So what are the benefits of JavaScript? Well, JavaScript is everywhere today. It's not just in the browsers. You have services, you have mobile applications, you even have embedded boards that now accept JavaScript and WebAssembly. It's kind of taken the role that BASIC had back in the day, when BASIC sort of was built into the system. But it performs quite well. You have JIT compilation now that converts JavaScript into bytecodes and further into machine code. So the performance is quite good. It's also completely agnostic. It operates on any operating system. It's completely tailored to the environment. So inside the browser, that's a browser environment. But it also works on shell as a general purpose scripting language. So you can write shell applications, you can write services and server applications with it. And it seems to have adopted mostly young developers, young followers. So there's a lot of talent that's starting out with JavaScript today. It's also popular to make mobile applications with it, although depending on how good you are, it depends really the quality you will get out of it. The major benefit, at least as far as I'm concerned, is that you have identical behavior on every system. So if you write a system service on Linux, as long as you pay attention to the file paths and things like that, it will behave identical on Windows. So you can just copy it over. But there are also quite a few downsides to JavaScript. The syntax, curly brackets, there's a lot of nested code, functions within functions, anonymous calls, anonymous classes, anonymous this and that. So it's very easy to make syntax mistakes when you're working with raw JavaScript. And there's also a huge amount of frameworks that are competing with each other. Google has their systems, other companies have their systems, and they're not always compatible. And the standards that are in the browser have, at least so far, been quite esoteric. Different browsers have different standards, different frameworks have different way of solving things. This has been cleaned up lately, but there's still a lot of mix and match out there. JavaScript is also extremely difficult to excuse me, difficult to maintain. Once you have large applications and frameworks, web applications with maybe 100 forms or something like that, then it becomes really painful to maintain it. It's not exactly easy on the eyes. And JavaScript also lacks a virtual method table, and that means that things like virtual and abstract methods goes out the window. So it does have its problems, and it's also extremely time consuming because of the syntax and the way that code is written. So this is where Quartex Pascal comes in as a sort of bridge between these two realities, between Delphi and the native reality and the scripting reality. And this is a completely community-funded project. We have a Patreon website where people can sign up to back the project. It's written 100% in Delphi. The compiler we have is based on Delphi WebScript. I'm sure you know about that. So we use that to build an AST, an abstract symbol table, and then we sort of extract information from that. And of course, it compiles to JavaScript. That is a part of Delphi WebScript. That's important because a lot of people think that I wrote the compiler, but that's not the case. Eric Grange wrote the compiler and is maintaining that. As far as I know, this is one of the larger projects that can be seen as an alternative to TypeScript. TypeScript has its own flavors. I guess we're more in the Delphi camp. So we try to stick with the standards that are established for Delphi. In order to make this work, I had to sit down and write an RTL from scratch. It was basically spent a year doing that in order to have a component structure, visual classes, and also we wanted to support Node.js on one hand, which is not in the browser, that is a shell and service applications, and also the visual stuff with an inheritance chain that covers both of these, which we have managed to do. As a result, you can basically generate code that runs on any system. You can also use it to write, mobile phone applications. You can target those embedded systems that I mentioned previously. So you sort of get, the benefits of both worlds. This also means that we couldn't really glue this into the Delphi IDE. That would require that I had access to the Delphi IDE code, because it would require quite a huge overhaul in the way that forms and views and different concepts operate. So I ended up writing an IDE from scratch, which is not for the faint of heart. It has taken basically 2 years to get everything working. So here is the IDE. It can probably look a little bit unfamiliar. The projects that we have in Quartex are folder-based. So what we're seeing on the left here is actually a folder overview, and then you can double-click on forms, for example. Then you have all the form files in there. Then you can click parent and go out. You can create new folders, and this is basically how web developers work. So the best way to look at this is more as there's a mix between a web designer tool like a Dreamweaver, for example, and a Delphi-like tool. So it's sort of it falls in between those two chairs. We also have widgets, which are custom controls. Those can be either written in QTX themselves, or they can be external existing JavaScript frameworks. And then somebody basically writes a wrapper unit, defines the controls and the classes that are in JavaScript, and initiates that. So these are drag and drop that you can drag and drop on a form. So I'm going to switch over so that we can have a little look at the IDE code. Here we are in Delphi. And like I said, this is a 100% Delphi project. So this is the main form, and there's a lot of work behind all of this, a lot of units in order to make this functional. So let's fire up. The first version is called Mount Kailash, and those of you who are not into history probably wonder what that is. It's the Indian version of Mount Olympus. So Delphi has, the Greek symbology with Athena, the Spartan helmet, and also previously we had Athena, which was sort of the patron saint of Delphi developers. I believe she was the goddess of wisdom. But I've sort of fallen in love with some of the Indian architecture and history, so I decided to go with that. So Mount Kailash is a good release candidate name. So I guess we can open up a project and have a look. This is a project that one of the backers made. It is a wrapper for something called Apex charts. So this is a JavaScript package that he has wrapped. Spent time, writing the Pascal code that sort of matches or defines the JavaScript, and then you can compile it and use it. So if we compile and run this, we get Apex charts that we can use in our applications. And these are, of course, drag and drop controls that you can see in the background here. So we have a lot of cool stuff that is coming out. We can also have a look at jQuery user interface. This is another user package one of the backers made. So here we have all the different widgets that are wrapped. You can go in and watch the source code. And these are going to be registered. These packages haven't been registered yet, but they will turn up here in the components plet, so to speak. So you can drag and drop them. So let's see how that looks. Yeah. So here we have all the different standard jQuery user interface things. And then you can switch theme on it, and yeah. So you can basically now work with these widgets from Object Pascal. So instead of having to, learn JavaScript and do all those things. Oh, socket error. Yeah, I'm offline, so that actually makes sense. So yeah, as you can see, this is relatively easy to understand Object Pascal. There are some syntax differences between Delphi and QTX flavor or Delphi WebScript flavor. And that has to do with, we have to have syntax that integrates with JavaScript. So there are a few things that will seem unfamiliar at first, but once you get the idea, it's relatively easy to get going with this. We also have, excuse me, I'm a little bit sore throat today. Different project types. So HTTP server, classical shell application, UDP server, web client, WebSocket client and server. We have 3 different application models. The application models, dynamic, tabbed, windowed, has to do with how forms are presented. If they in windowed mode, they will have, a window title and so forth, and they will behave a little bit different. In a dynamic applications, the forms are created one after the other, sort of stacked downwards, which is typical for a normal website. Tab dynamic is, well, like the name say, it's inside a tab, which can be good for information pages. So we can have a look at that as well. I believe it was theme test. This is just sort of a kitchen sink project where I just drag and drop stuff I test. So here we have form 1. I have easy animations, list boxes, checkbox, combo. There's a tab that enables or disables the header of the tab component. Go to form 2, form 3, and form 1. So you have, the sliding, the iPhone-like sliding doors, if you like. I guess we can look at something a little bit simpler before we dig into the actual code. Now, one of the differences between Delphi and QTX is that we operate with something called delegates, which you probably know from C# if you've ever used that. So a delegate is basically an event wrapped as an object, and you can attach as many delegates as you like to an object. So if I, for example, I want 3 on-click handlers on the list box, I can simply, go in here, yeah, click delegates. Yeah, click delegate, and I can add one of these. And I can add another one if I also want that, Okay, I want 2 click delegates on this one. I can double click just like in Delphi, and it will introduce a handler for you. Do the same for the second handler. And these will fire in the sequence that you defined them, that you added them. So let's see. I guess we can do a right line. Second. Right line and first. So when I click on the list box now, those 2 should fire. Let's first add some text to the list box. Click, there we go. First and second. So it's really easy to add event handling to it. So let's remove those. Then we can remove the code. There are a couple of things that I need to add, of course, like automatic method removal and stuff like that, but we're getting there. And you also have things like, let's see, self, here we go, get shortcuts, code suggestion, so you can sort of navigate, easy to learn the methods and so forth. So yeah, it works quite well. And here you have the windowed application model. So it has, all the typical features of a window. So the idea here is that if you want to create sort of a desktop application that runs in your browser, then that is possible, with different windows. So if you have written a Delphi backend that essentially gives you like invoicing, for example, and you want to create a web front end for that service application that you have in Delphi, then this can be done here. You can use REST calls, for example, and create an API that talks to the server and presents it as moving windows in the browser. We actually have a desktop system that we sort of prefabricated that is going to be basically part of the projects. And that will actually clone out a complete desktop with 5 background services, Node.js services, that you then have full control over. That provides things like file system over WebSocket, printing, remote printing, sharing files, chat, and application control. So you can actually install applications on it. And this will allow you to create things like NAS boxes, network active storage boxes that has a user interface, kiosk systems. All of that can be easily created using this system. So the final thing we're going to have a look at is server programming, which is actually very enjoyable and quite easy to do. And this targets Node.js. So far, we have targeted the document object model, the visual aspect, which runs in the browser. This one is going to cover Node.js, working with Node.js. And that is completely different. That has no visual aspects to it at all. So if you try to use a visual component or a class that is designed to run in the browser, if you try to use that in your Node.js project, you will get exceptions and problems. So yes, let's see if we can find a server. Go down. I think I have a HTTP server here someplace. Go server test. So this project looks a little bit different because this is non-visual. There's no forms or anything like that. So the project unit is application entry point dot pass. And that is also true for visual application. That is sort of the standard starting point. And this is where we create the application object. This is the exact same thing as Delphi does. The application objects take care of everything. In our case, this creates the T-node application, which is defined here in the app body. And in this case, we simply create an HTTP server, and we set up the event handler, we give it a port, and we activate it. And this is more or less the exact same code that you would write, if you're using Indy or something like that. Here's the handler. So we simply emit some text that we have received an HTTP request. We dump out the remote address and so forth. And then we end the request by sending back a little bit of HTML snippet. And that can be anything. It can be REST, a JSON code or something like that if you want. If you're talking to a database and then want to return some actual data. So let's fire that up, and then switch over here. Hello world. Here we have the output. We received a HTTP request for the root, which is the default document, and also a request for the favorite icon, which we don't serve out. We just return this static HTML in this case. So that's the most basic server that you have. And just like Delphi, you have access to the source code. You can see where it's what it wraps, and also how to define external classes. This is an external class. This is actually a JavaScript object that is defined, or that is a part of Node.js. So we simply need to have a Object Pascal definition for it and a name. Then it's possible then you can create this class like any other object. So you have full access to headers and everything. It simplifies working with Node.js, because Node.js can really be difficult if you don't have these classes. Things like working with the file system involves a lot of nested code, nested callbacks, and so having standard Object Pascal classes that does all of this for you and makes it readable and easy to access is a great bonus. So yeah. Well, I hope that this has been somewhat informative. It was kind of an ad hoc presentation, but for those of you who have been following this project, I think maybe that at least you see that there has been a lot of progress since the previous presentation. I did a presentation for the Australian Delphi user group last year. That was sort of demonstrating the prototype of this. And yeah, we're getting close now to the release candidates, and a little bit of polish here and there that needs to be done, but all in all, I think we have achieved what we set out to do, and then we have something that we can build on from now on. So yeah, there's a lot of work behind all of this. Well, I guess we can wrap the video part of this up now. So see you soon. Cheers. One final thing I want to mention is that we now have a website set up for this project. So you can go to quartexdeveloper.com and you can read more about the project there.
John was going to try and be on for Q&A, but I don't see him, so I'm guessing he didn't make it. I did put the link in for the website in the chat window there. It's quartexdeveloper.com. So the question here, does it work with the community edition of Delphi? It is a standalone project, so it's built with Delphi. It probably could be compiled with community edition, although I'm not sure what version and what edition he used. But you can download it, and it does not require Delphi to run. But it does. It is built with Delphi and is compatible with Delphi using Object Pascal. Well, some of the code's compatible, has limited compatibility, but still good working with this. Here is the link for it, quartexdeveloper.com. Yes, incredible amount of work. Quartex is totally mind-blowing. I'm really excited about Quartex. There's a number of other tools. TMS Web Core is similar in some regards. So there's a lot of different options out there as far as how to fill this niche, how to do web development from Delphi. And this is one that is more about like taking your skills as a Delphi developer and making it easy for you to move to the web. Let's see. I think that is it. Oh, Patrick points out TMS Web Core is client side only. I wasn't sure. So yeah, if you want to get it, it's go to Quartex Developer. I believe that's the download link. I was out there earlier looking at it. Or you might have to go through the Patreon. So it is donation based. So it might only be available for backers on Patreon right now. Licensing. So yeah, I would suggest if you're interested in it, check out the Patreon page, and once you're backing on there, you can message Jon. He was planning to be on here. Let's see. So at the hobbyist level, $25 a month. You love the project, you get regular binaries and updates, public articles, and community articles. So there you go. He says it's shareware, so maybe once the release is out, he'll have. I thought this was the release because it said 1.0, but apparently it's almost a release candidate. But maybe once the release is out, it'll be freely available because he did say it was going to be a shareware license. Yeah, for right now, you can. Looks like you can join the Patreon to get access to it. So Patrick does say to download it, you have to be on Patreon or buy a license with PayPal. Okay. And someone else saying that they like interweb. That's great. Occasionally I'll get somebody that'll tell me like, oh, you won't like this, but I use AnyDAC instead of FireDAC. And I'm like, if it works for you, awesome. I don't care. If interweb is making you productive and you're winning, then use interweb, right? My goal is always to tell you about lots of options out there and help you find the right tool for you. And honestly, if you're using C# and for most of your development for some reason, then that's great. I'm happy for you. But if you're using C# for something that Delphi would be better for, which you'll see an Ian session tomorrow about using Delphi as a weapon, there are a number of places where Delphi is a better choice, then I want to make sure you're aware of Delphi as an option. At the end of the day, I just want you to be successful and get things done and make awesome stuff. But I just happen to believe that for a lot of scenarios, Delphi is the best choice for that. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Patrick, and everyone else that's out here posting and answering questions and stuff in the comments. Really appreciated. And I think I'm going to actually have we have a little bit of time left. We're finished with the main body of content, but we do have some lightning talks. So I'm going to run a lightning talk right now, and everything else will be posted later on YouTube. So the blogs.embarcadero.com or the delphicon.embarcadero.com will be the place you can find replays and more in the near future.